Hello and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achin, proud to present to you a latest series of crisp and clear strategic discussions called the General's Talk, featuring Lieutenant General Ravi Shankar and Lieutenant General Satish Dua. Lieutenant General Ravi Shankar, PVSM, AVSM, BSM, a retired Director General of the Artillery, now a professor in the Aerospace Department of the IIT Chennai. He is also an author of a strategic blog called the Gunnershot.com. Lieutenant General Satish Dua, PVSM, UYSM, SM, BSM, served as the Chief of the Integrated Defence Staff to the Chairman of the Chiefs of Staff Committee. Today, he is a strategic thinker as well as an author of a book called The India's Brave Hearts. Hello and welcome to Dev Talks in this very new latest episode of the General's Talk. The episode is going to be termed as Come September in Afghanistan. Before I begin this episode, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank and appreciate both the generals who are explaining the nuances of geopolitics in very, very simple terms to all of us who are interested in this field. It is for us to understand the situation around us, and I thank both of them for helping us out. Thank you, sirs, for joining me today on this very important session for the coming up withdrawal of the United States troops from Afghanistan.
Thanks, Adi. It's a pleasure as always.
Likewise, Adi.
I'd like to begin by saying, sir, on the 1st of June, 10 very horrifying incidences of violence took place in Afghanistan. These ranged from car bombs to killings to raids and so on and so forth. Such violence is pretty much natural to that country when we read the news. Daily life in Afghanistan is not normal by any cost. Come September, or actually even before, if reports are to be believed, the US troops will fly out of Afghanistan and leave all the current actors to their own devices. A new deck of cards will appear, a new set of players on the table. What game will they play is something that we are trying to analyze. Everyone is cognizant of this, and they are preparing themselves for this all new chapter. There is no one more aware of this situation than the Afghanis themselves. With about 2 months left on the out and out, the Taliban and the Afghan government, which are the main internal factors, are trying to get into a single room in Doha and come to some sort of an agreement. They might reach one for the present, I might add. That is, if they have an agreement to hold the talks in the first place. However, given the fundamental differences between both the parties, any agreement that they would come down to under any pressure from around the world would be fragile at best. That is the international expectation, and I think most of us around in the region also believe so. Some of the latest players or some of the dormant players in this game who are ready in waiting to join the fray is the IS and the Al-Qaeda. It is a very dangerous situation, and its outcome will reverberate around the world. Will it be anarchy, or will the naughty boy of Afghanistan finally stand up and get the class straight? As I said, there are a lot of players. The players are Pakistan, India, China, United States, Russia, and Iran. I'd like to start with our favorite, Pakistan. General Dua, since you have been dealing with Pakistan a lot, and your knowledge about the country is very extensive, I'd like to ask you, Pakistan seems to be walking a very tight rope since the United States has announced this decision of withdrawal. From the talk of Pakistan giving US some bases in Pakistan to the contest of the Durand Line, not to even mention the fringe elements that walk around in the country and the countryside of Pakistan. What are your foresights for this country and its effects?
Well, Adi, Pakistan is perhaps a very critical, a very vital player in this complex dynamic of Afghanistan. It always has been, right from the start of sharing the Durand Line, which the Pashtuns both sides don't recognize, to being a key player even in the days of the Soviet invasion, when the US then used Pakistan as a channel to funnel, to fuel, to finance the resistance to the Soviets. And then on, they went on to create some organizations, some clandestine, surreptitious activities, all funneled through Pakistan. All of that is now coming back again. Like you rightly said, come September, this is a very melodious tunes Janil Shankar and I would recall, I mean, of hard times. But 20 years ago, in September, there was a very different call that happened. 9/11 happened, and which thereafter caused the whole cauldron, the spotlight to shift to Middle East. Now, as this, again, like you mentioned, come September this year, when the US forces pull out, what have they achieved, what they have not achieved, what have they managed to stir up? It's a hornet's nest, is something that we will all see it unfold, and some of it we'll discuss today. So coming back to the point about Pakistan, Pakistan has very close linkages, cultural, religious, and especially in this military terror dynamic. It's a very complex linkage because it has had good linkages with several rebel groups there. It has come back to bite them. I remember, I think it was Hillary Clinton who said that if you have snakes in your backyard, they will come back to bite you. So that is what has happened. There are several rebel groups which are operating in operating off their bases in Afghanistan, but they strike in Pakistan. The Taliban is operating off their bases in Pakistan, and they operate in Afghanistan. So there's a big bad land there. So talking about that, leaving that dynamic aside, we also must remember that their relation, that is Pakistan's relations today with the Afghan government, are not exactly a bed of roses. They have their own thorns, and that's another dynamic that will play out, because we all know, like you said, we have different stakeholders in Afghanistan. So Afghan government is one of them, is a major player, but so is Taliban, apart from some other smaller stakeholders, but so is Taliban over there. So in this balancing act between them, while they're coming to the peace table, like you said, they're trying to talk peace, whether they can achieve it or not, even theoretically, whether it will sustain or not is to be seen later. It all remains to be seen. Having said that, the interesting part is that Pakistan today, its influence over Taliban is also waning. Pakistan is also very adversely affected by Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is operating from Afghanistan. Now that's creating a major problem for the Pakistan government. Pakistan has its proxies in Haqqani networks, the Quetta Shura, the Manshera Shura, the Peshawar Shura, the other shuras that are mostly named after names of cities in Pakistan to create that link. But they are perhaps not as powerful as the Taliban itself. Before I sort of hand over or ask General Shankar to speak on this, I want to also point out how it will affect two other players. One, so what does Pakistan do? Pakistan also perhaps wants or urges China to enter. Now, for China to enter, it's a whole new dynamic. I will ask General Shankar to cover that. Also, there is another issue, that who will actually put boots on ground? That's a big if and a big issue where even India will get involved, and we'll talk about that a little later. Pakistan's own dynamic, politically, economically, it is at its weakest. We don't need to expand the discussion. We know that they are on tenuous ground there. So, and the last point that I wish to make, because you started off with that as an introduction to me, is that will it take away their involvement, Pakistan's involvement in Afghanistan, especially after September? Will it create more problems in Kashmir, or will it take the focus away from Pakistan's focus away from Kashmir? General Shankar, would you like to add something?
I think you covered a lot of ground. If I add to issue, the Durand Line destabilizes Pakistan. You look at it, Fatah, then you look at the Balochistan problems, the TTP, which wants to overthrow the government in Pakistan. Then you have the PTM, Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, right? All these put together also destabilize Pakistan. As a result, Now, Pakistan till now thought it was India was its existential challenge. Henceforth, it will be Afghanistan which will pose the existential challenge, right? So and once USA leaves Afghanistan, Pakistan can no more hunt with the hound and run with the hare. That's over. So there is an issue, and it's midwifing China into the equation. Whatever happens in Afghanistan there'll be a direct impact on Pakistan, right? And this is a war like what General Satish Dua said. It's a war which it cannot afford. I don't, and with the way Pakistan has gone in terms of its economy and everything else, it's in for a tough time. It's no more the old days of strategic space that I think is out. But it's a very dynamic kind of a situation.
A tightrope indeed, sir.
Yeah.
Janishankar, you and General Dua, both of you mentioned the word China, and that country is inconspicuously coming up within this whole dialogue. It was quite silent from before. Now it is becoming a little more vociferous and more powerful in the region, if I may, put it that way. Janishankar, you write a lot about China. What do you think? They've offered to Kabul recently with regards to connectivity to BRI. They have been trying to get an inroad into that entire area for whatever reasons that they've got. What is it that they're looking for in Afghanistan?
China has invested in Afghanistan. It has invested into the current government. It has invested into Taliban, and it is posing itself as the peacemaker between the two. It has also invested about $3 billion in a giant copper mine in Ainak, near Kabul. But that's not the great issue. The issue is that till now, China had the insurance of having USA there. When USA and NATO troops were there, everyone was focused on what will happen that side, and China could get away with it. That insurance is now gone, right? China has to protect its own interests. So we've spoken of the financial interests. That's fine. The major problem for China is that its proximity of Xinjiang. You all spoke of Al Qaeda, IS, and Taliban, plus any other group which will come up, and radicalism and all the shuras which General Dua pointed out. Now, all these will as a heady cocktail, and that cocktail could go towards China, which means Xinjiang. Okay, so they want to ward that off. So that's going to be a difficult thing. And especially if the situation in Afghanistan degenerates into a civil war. If it's a agreement between the two which holds, fine, but it's good. The expectation, like you said, is going to be a civil war. So that's a issue. Already China has taken steps, and it has put a small base in Tajikistan. It is just north of the Wakhan corridor, and they're already building a road which is about 15% complete. Okay, so this is all there. Plus, Afghanistan's destabilizing effect on Pakistan means that the CPEC and BRI will get affected. I mean, on one hand, China wants to take its BRI through Afghanistan onto Iran because of the new equations it is developing with Iran, right? On the other hand, any degeneration of the situation in Afghanistan and Pakistan will destabilize both. So it's a difficult kind of a situation. And now you will see that, that's my guess, that China will get more drawn into, this entire situation. Like every superpower, any superpower which has had to become a superpower has had to shed blood. And, leadership doesn't come easy, it comes with blood. You look at it, Russia, USA, Britain earlier. So that is going to start now. How can China handle it as an issue? But since we are on this issue, I'll cover two more issues, Iran and Russia. Now, Iran is the western neighbor of Afghanistan. Now, Iran is a complex nation. It's coming out of isolation. It has its own equations. There's a deal with China going on. It has good links with Russia, bad links with the USA, all that is known. but it wants to secure its own border. It has its own trade interests. It does not want to give away controlling interests from Afghanistan, right? Plus, Iran wants to play the regional role. It can't, after all, it is still has to be the Shia dominant thing, lest the Sunni factions of the Taliban take over. So it's a dynamic, and how this dynamic will go on, only time will tell. That's an unknown quantity. Now I'll turn to another one, because all these three are interconnected. Russia. Russia is an extra-regional player. It wants to become a superpower once again. It has got no direct stakes there. It's all about influence. But more importantly, Russia is worried about narcotics. After all, Afghanistan is also a narcotics base. And narcotics going north through the Central Asian Republic. The Central Asian Republics are all the underbelly of Russia. And just as radical Islam can go towards China, it can go into the Central Asian republics, which are largely and touch Russia. So Russia has got its own interests. So you'll see, besides Pakistan, China, Iran, and Russia have interests.
It prompts me to add to what General Shankar said. The linkage between China and Iran is growing. And so I think that's also all the more reason why we, that is India, should step up and try and enlarge on our Chabar connection. And we have an advantage. Other than perhaps China, we have India has very good relations with all the stakeholders that are involved. So we also can sort of continue to engage with everyone. And India enjoys a very good goodwill with the Afghan government. Of course, we'll perhaps discuss India separately.
There's a good old saying which comes true in this particular factor, sir, and it's especially used in the kitchen. Too many chefs spoil the broth, and the broth seems to be spoiling before it has been put on the gas.
Yeah.
General Shankar mentioned USA. USA is trying hard to declare victory. They have to. There is no other way for them to look at it, sir. Leaving that aside, I'd like to know, US is not going to leave this area just empty-handed. They're not just going to walk away from this place. And as I said in the opening part as well, they are looking for bases. They are going to have want to keep some sort of influence within Afghanistan, considering the kind of violence which is taking place as well. Jaldua, what is your opinion, sir? I'd like to know your opinion with regards to how does USA now look at this entire situation? What are they trying to do, and how do you think they're going to do it?
First of all, straight off the bat, I would like to say that whenever we hear of commentaries on this topic or read about it, I think we formed a wrong impression by hearing this sentence being said, US is going to pull out of Afghanistan in September. And I can see what General Shankar is nodding about. I'm sure he understands what is coming next. It is not the US which is pulling out. It is the US forces which are pulling out. Their diplomatic endeavor, in fact, there are several other endeavors, whether it is economic assistance, humanitarian assistance, is going to stay. Not only stay, it is going to perhaps endeavors develop. So the other linkages will stay. They are moving their forces out. Will they move it out totally? Will some agencies remain? That remains to be seen. Will they leave totally, or will they monitor some areas? Because monitoring can be done without having troops on ground there. You can have bases around, because keeping an area under monitoring, active monitoring, is in their interest. They want to, US would like to ensure that they don't, that there is no threat to security, to the US security that can emanate from this area. So with the enablers and tools available, certain more activities are likely to be there. And that is where other countries, other stakeholders, other partners come in. Also, I've read somewhere that they've committed support for aviation maintenance of the Afghan Air Force. Now, that's a major issue. When you commit support for aviation maintenance, because that today the platforms in the air are the ones that are being going to be used, apart from space, are also the ones that are going to be used for monitoring. So having said that, they are going to maintain some presence, some by proxy. Are all the NATO forces, there are about 8,000 of them, if I have my figures right, are all of them going to, are all of them pulling out or not? So certain things will remain to be seen. I've just made my point that it is not a total pullout. That's one aspect. Now, what will be the interplay of internal or domestic stakeholders? We've already discussed a few, that is internal to Afghanistan, and external, that means other countries, where it is NATO on one side, including Turkey. Turkey is another player because it comes in as a part of NATO. And, Afghanistan has asked Turkey to, for example, Turkey has offered that they will take care of Afghanistan, the Kabul airport. They run Kabul airport, which the Taliban have not agreed to. Why did I point that airport out? It's a small tactical thing, but in a landlocked country like Afghanistan, that airport becomes very vital if it comes to a civil war, if it comes to withdrawing, evacuating people of different countries. So all in all, and then the arrangements with other countries, some of which we have already discussed, that is the external stakeholders. Now, that is something that US will like to continue to engage other stakeholders, engage the domestic stakeholders. And for that, some other than troops presence, some kind of engagement will always remain.
The US will not let go of this area completely. It cannot afford to. Why did it go there? You have to go back to that first thing. Why did it go there? To ensure homeland security. If it disengages from this area completely, its homeland security will again get back to threat. So it's going to use force. It's going to use aerial force. It's already forcing Pakistan to give a base. Okay, it's seeking a base from where it can strike. It's not going to let China and Pakistan take over Afghanistan by proxy. That's not going to happen. It's going to support the Afghan government by air, not the Taliban by air. So it's going to enforce that agreement, whatever it comes to. It is disengaging its forces from Afghanistan. Like what General Satish Dua said, not from Afghanistan. It will remain engaged in Afghanistan. It might not be a direct engagement, it will be an indirect engagement. Be rest assured, it will not hesitate to use force. One thing which is important, by taking forces out of Afghanistan, USA has got itself out of one click. It does not need to use minimum force anymore. It can use maximum force. Okay, so the air power of USA, which is fantastic, can come to bear. So it is not a cakewalk for everyone. Okay, so we have to understand that, right? And of course, India is USA's strategic partner. Like what General Dua said, we have a lot of links. Yeah, Satish, I think you should take that on. Issue of what will be India's role in this entire cauldron. We could discuss that.
Okay, let's take in the coming days, the two major stakeholders in Afghanistan, internal, domestically, is the government and the Taliban. And I read somewhere that government controls about 50% and 30% is with Taliban and 20% is still contested areas. That is Indian relations with the Afghan government are good. We have, I think we are one of the biggest contributors to the reconstruction package. We have already, we've spoken about, I'll leave that for General Shankar to cover because he's been writing about that. So we have stakes in Afghanistan with the government. The only thing I'd like to talk about the engagement part is that very recently, we've also sort of opened up our channels. We made contact with the Taliban. Now, that was something that India was not doing earlier. Very recently, we've sort of made contact with them. we have differences with them. That is, India's position is very different from that of Taliban on several issues, including the issue of women rights and their ways of democracy or not. But the fact that there is some linkages or some sort of communication has opened up is an encouraging sign. We've spoken to Mullah Brother, who's now one of the co-founders, the number 2 man there. Ganesh Shankar, would you like to comment on the reconstruction? Other things that we can play up?
See, we've played a large hand in reconstructing Afghanistan in the past. I'll just give you 2 examples. The rest, a hell of a lot we've invested. Their parliament, we built their parliament building, right? Which is, restarting the democratic process or the government process. We've also built the Zaranj Dalaram road, which connects Afghanistan to Iran. And we are part of the Chabahar development process and right up to Zahedan, the north, the railway link and the road links. So that gives an alternate channel, complete alternate channel. So your trade, everything. It is no more that you're dependent only on Pakistan. So that is one. And plus, our equation with Iran is good. It's not bad. Huh? In fact, if there's anyone who's got decent equations with Iran, it is still us. The Chabahar port is still on. So we need to enlarge that. We need to enlarge that corridor completely. Right? And plus, that will be the one, if you see the violence graphs in Afghanistan, the violence is more towards the Pakistan side.
Yeah.
The other side is quite, peaceful. So you have now with that approach from the West, you have a connectivity there. So you can sustain that government even if it's under a problem. You can link out to Northern Alliance. And of course, one thing, which is very important, where I think India has a large stake along with the US, is in facilitating US to operate air bases. Could we have your view, Satish?
I'll even stick on this topic of air bases. Like you said earlier, that US is persuading Pakistan to give them, once again, give them an air base. Lest they be reduced to only operate off the carriers in the Gulf. That's one option that will always remain, and that is something that will always actively be used by the US from the south. But I'll stick my neck out to say that we have some presence in Tajikistan. Now, maybe we can actively consider if it is possible for the US to operate off those bases, that base of ours in Tajikistan. And we must remember that this tool is this air platform, that the expense of repetition, I say that this is something that is going to come into play much more now that the US is going to pull its boots out.
Yeah, that's important. You give the air bridge to USA and look at what the effect will be on Quad and, your international geopolitics and all that. So if someone says that India doesn't have cards to play in Afghanistan, sorry, we have hell of a lot of cards to play. That's my first thing. I mean, there's a perception with a lot of people that, we don't have cards. I'll put 2 more issues. I'd like to discuss about Kashmir, the effect on Kashmir, which Satish, you should take it on because you got more experience there. But I'll put one significant issue. Both of you have said we have significant people-to-people links with Afghanistan. Cast your mind to Delhi. In Delhi, all the most important embassies are on Shantipat. USA, China, Pakistan, Britain, Germany, all these are on, Shantipat. France. What people don't realize is there's an Afghan embassy on Pakistan, on Shantipat. Afghanistan has always had a place of pride in India. And we're not going to give it up that easily. And they also know it. The days when Taliban were in rule in Afghanistan, this embassy was deserted. Now it's come back alive. Okay, so there is a big linkage, right? And then, of course, there's the Kashmir linkage. Satish, you'd like to say something?
Last time, I beg your pardon. When I say last time, I'm talking about late
Yeah,
80s.
80s.
Soviet, when at the time of Soviet pullout. And that is the time we had this elections in Kashmir, which proved to be a turning point. So, and we all know that 1988 is roughly the time when violence started in Kashmir, when terrorism hit Kashmir, J&K in a big way. And that happened, the timing was such, and that is the time when Pakistan had launched that death by 1,000 cuts on India. So there was this ready-made pool of so-called jihadi fighters available for Pakistan to channelize in this direction. And I have personally been on the line of control around that time, 98 to 2001. We've had several encounters where we had Afghani nationals, we've had Sudan nationals who were killed. So they were, I'm using this phrase is mine. They were almost like fighters without a cause, though they will say that they're with a cause. They were fighters without a cause. One day they could fight in Afghanistan. Next day they could be creating IEDs and explosions in Pakistan itself. And then they were used in Kashmir. And some of them plundered and they indulged in all wrongful activities in Kashmir. So we've seen those things happen. So once again, how it sits now, we don't know. In Kashmir, that means how the stakeholders come to an arrangement that we've been discussing, we are not very sure. But right now in Kashmir, what is the situation in Kashmir? The Kashmir situation is such that violence is at all-time low. In the last about more than a year, 18 months if I'm not wrong, there hasn't been a single death of a civilian in any activity by government forces, not even by tear gas or pellet injuries, let alone bullets. So in Kashmir today, the vested interests are actually very frustrated. The other side is very frustrated. They want something to happen. And that is why this thing to try and draw linkages with Palestine, try to draw if there were COVID deaths and things like that. So in this situation where there is frustration, if you are going to get more availability and an influx of these fighters, maybe Pakistan would then again try to make a renewed push to push them across the thing. Though I understand the ceasefire is holding, our anti-infiltration grid is robust, but that's another dynamic. So we have to see, like I said earlier, will it take Pakistan's focus away from Kashmir? That is their involvement in the dynamic of Afghanistan, or will it also at the tactical level give them more of these fighters to try and pump in Kashmir and up the ante in Kashmir over here? So those are the things that remain to be seen, and not to mention the China angle or the China the corner in this issue with Kashmir.
You know, having seen the danger in Kashmir, my opinion is that immediately there's no danger of an influx. You know, the whole situation is too messy out there and too fluid out there. There has to be some stabilization before something happens. Okay, and also don't forget, you know, Pakistan can't put a one-way street of all these jokers into Kashmir because FATA will come into play.
Yeah.
Right? That is also there. It's not off. Nothing is off. Pakistan itself is in a difficult situation. We have our stakes there. We have people. Look, at the end of the day, it's people. People matter, right? It is not as if the Chinese interests matter and all that. And any trouble in Kashmir which happens on that axis means that some of those guys are available to go into China also. So that also is, you know, it's not an easy thing for anyone to start trouble in Kashmir today. Okay, so there are going to be, it's not like earlier day when the strategic space was available, we didn't have anything, but at the same time, I think our system has to keep in mind as to how to handle this whole story.
Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to make, you're right in what you said. What I'm trying to say is that when 1988 happened, initially the whole Indian state army, we were taken a little unaware. We thought for a couple of years, we kept thinking it's a law and order problem and we'll be able to sort it out and things like that. But now that we know, we can read the tea leaves better. And to that extent, we should just remain prepared, geared, and have a very close monitoring of the situation.
And one more interesting thing which I'd like to highlight in this entire thing is who will put boots on ground. Definitely not India and USA. Not Iran also won't do that. So the question is, will it be Pakistan or China? It's a $1 million question because each is egging the other on. China wants to outsource the entire Afghanistan problem to Pakistan, push Pakistan's people in and all. If they do it, Pakistan is finished, in my opinion.
China has problems.
China can't put boots on ground in Afghanistan. And my military horse sense, or an animal, the MA mule, mountain artillery mule sense tells me that if you don't have boots on ground, Afghanistan will not stabilize. That's our history. With so many factions of Taliban, with so many competing interests, you need someone there.
As an infantryman, that's the note where it should end on. Whether a boots on
whoever takes his boots should have the horseshoe and the nails well,
entrenched.
put in. Entrenched because they're going to need it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I do hope, for the sake of Afghan people, who are a great population and great people, that they find their peace. That's my hope for them.
I think most of us think is that. And just to wrap up what both the generals have said, I think I'm going to start with Pakistan, since both of the discussions started off with Pakistan and kind of ended in Pakistan as well. It is interesting to see Pakistan being on a slippery wicket, one foot in the grave, still wants to try and do something if they do try it in Kashmir. Although this time I agree with both of you that crossing the Chinese lines in terms of the CPEC for the Afghans is going to be a little bit of a challenge. And the Chinese will not probably accept temporary bases or training camps around their areas. It's going to be interesting to see how the situation pans out. Another thing that both the generals have brought out, that the US is actually not leaving. They're just getting their forces out. And that is one distinction that is not being brought out in a lot of strategic circles. We are talking about USA just packing their bags and getting out. Well, that's not the case. A lot of other factors, China ever building in Afghanistan, wanting its own interests to safeguard its own arm, if I may put it that way. There are loads of news about movements building up in East Turkestan, which is what they're wanting to safeguard. Iran and Russia, Iran being a big central player in this entire region, will not let us forget its presence here. And I think I agree with General Shankar when he said that Iran needs to be kept into this entire game with India's involvement in it. Russia, of course, the big moderator. Let's see how time will tell how much of an influence that they will have again with their past nightmares. Thank you both for joining me today, sir. It's been wonderful talking to both of you. And this is a ever-evolving topic. I'm quite sure that in the coming future, we'll discuss this again.
Thank you. Thank you, Adi.
Thanks, Adi. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.